Well, good morning. Welcome to North Shore. I'm so glad to see all of you with us. So glad you're joining us here if you're in this room, and welcome to those of you who are joining us online as well. Some time ago, I was sitting on a plane, and it was kind of getting ready to take off. We were kind of taxiing down the runway, and before we did, the pilot warned us that when we took off, we were going to encounter some turbulence. And if you've been on a plane, usually they'll say that in some kind of a polite way. They'll say something like, keep your seats because we might encounter a few bumps, right? Just a very delicate, nice word like that. But this pilot was a little more direct because he said, and I quote, "This is going to be pretty bad." And I'm not really a pilot, but pretty bad sounds like the plane's going to go down. So I started to feel a little bit tense, and I could tell the person next to me was really nervous. So I looked him in the eye and said, I know it's perfectly safe. This is a perfectly safe way to travel. And while we were on the ground, I really believed that. I really did. I was very convinced of that. But when we took off, it was pretty bad. It was one of the most turbulent flights I've ever been on. I mean, we were bouncing and shaking and dropping and moving, and it was pretty violent, it feels. And even though I believed that we were perfectly safe, the palms of my hand seemed to believe something different. And the pit in my stomach seemed to believe something different. And my armpits seemed to believe something different. In fact, I was such a mess, the person next to me literally started to massage my arm as we were flying. I was so grateful it was my wife because it would have been weird. It just was a weird thing. As it turns out on that day, I realized that my belief in gravity was deeper, it ran deeper than my belief in safety. In fact, whether I'm really aware of it or not, my belief in gravity drives my behavior, my actions all the time. More than almost anything else. It can keep me from walking off a ledge, and it can help me handle objects without breaking them. And if you look at how I live, if you just look at my actions, you could tell that gravity is something I believe in, whether I say it, admit it, even think it, or not. So why am I telling you that story? Because everybody has a set of assumptions or beliefs about how the world works that will determine how they live. Every one of you have a set of assumptions or beliefs, a worldview, a paradigm, if you will, that drives your actions and how you live. Think about it this way. It isn't just what you say you believe, it's what you believe regardless of what you say. It's what you really believe regardless of what you say. Let me give you a few examples because it's very prevalent in our world, and most people have a paradigm, and they may not even be aware of the paradigm that's driving their life. Here's one example from our day. It's this. This life is all there is. That may not be something that someone says they believe or that they think a lot about, but basically they believe, I'm born, I have so many years to, accumulate as much pleasure or power or happiness as I can, and then you die, and that's about it. And whether, again, you're aware of it or not, this assumption will drive your behavior and your actions. I know people today, even people who would say they believe in God, but if you look at their life, if you look closely at how they live, you can tell their actions are being driven by a paradigm that basically says, you need to get as much as you can, as fast as you can, while you still can, because this life is all there is. Another paradigm in our day that kind of drives people's lives is this one. If it feels right, do it. Again, it may not be what I advertise as what I believe, but if it feels right, do it. If it feels right to hide the truth, then you should do it. If it feels right to gossip about someone when they're not in the room, it's okay to do it. If it feels right to have casual sex, then just do it. And again, it may not be what people say they believe. They may not even think that they believe this, but if you look at their actions. And again, this happens outside the church and inside the church. People who may say, I believe in Jesus, I know a lot about the Bible, but really when it comes down to it, I'll pick those verses that I feel make me feel more comfortable that I want to do, because if it feels right to me, then I want to do it. Perhaps the most prevalent paradigm in our day is this one. No one cares about my well-being but me. Again, it may not be what people say they believe, but if you look at their life, look at their actions, no one really cares about my life and me. I have to just basically take care of myself. And I have to admit, I've spent a lot of my years in this place in life. Many of those years professing in a God who loves me, but deep down believing, whether it's because of pain or difficulty or unanswered prayer, that I basically have to fend for myself. Because when turbulence came, when difficulties came, my actions, my attitudes, my armpits began to tell a different story and began to reveal this paradigm that lives beneath what I say I believe. It's what I really believe regardless of what I say. Did you know that you have a paradigm for your life? Did you know that there's something, a belief, an assumption, a worldview that's driving how you live? And I'm not asking you what you would say you believe, or especially in church, what you would say you believe because you feel like it's important to say and believe the right things. But if you just look at your behavior, your actions, your attitudes, your impulses, what drives you in your relationships, in your work, with how you handle money, with how you treat other people, with how you handle difficulty, with how you handle your enemies, if you look at all that set of data, you'll see a picture of a paradigm. It's what you really believe, regardless of what you say. And so for the next 5 weeks, we're going to dig into these paradigms that drive our lives. I'm going to invite you to be really honest and dig into the paradigm that may be driving your life. If you say you don't believe in God, I'm so glad you're here because I think this will help you answer questions about what's actually running your life and maybe help answer some questions about God as well. And if you say you believe in God, I think this will challenge you to ask the question, do I really live my life as if God is real and what he says is actually true? And so to help us do this, we're going to walk through, for 5 weeks, we're going to walk through a real simple text from the Bible called Psalm 23. It's written by a man named David. He's one of the most famous kings in the history of the nation of Israel. But in his youth, David spent his days tending sheep for his father. And you'll see evidence of that background in the language of this text. And so I'm going to read it, and you can follow along as we go right now. This is Psalm 23. Listen to these words. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." Now, I know many of you have heard these words before. Many of you have heard them, you've said them, you've learned them in a church setting, you've heard them recited at a wedding or even at a memorial service. And so it's hard for them to feel fresh. It's hard for these words maybe to feel like we're being confronted with a paradigm-shifting text, but that's exactly what they are. What would life look like if you really believed what I just read was true? That's what I want you to think about. That's what we're going to spend some time thinking about together. And in fact, to help you do this, we've actually printed this text for you. They're in the cards in the seat in front of you or under your chairs as well. You can grab one and take one with you. I'm actually going to invite you, if you call North Shore home, to take these next 5 weeks and memorize these words. There's like 110 words. Just learn them. To be able to call them to mind and live as if they're true. We're also, as we've done before, going to send out a daily text reflection or devotional that can help you put these words into practice in your life. If you text Psalm 23 to 97000, it will subscribe you to a daily text. You'll get one a day about 9 a.m. and just help you think about, how do I apply this, think about this, learn this, live in this? How do I change my paradigm and live in the right one? So you can do that as well. But this morning, we're going to start with just the first 8 words. So for those of you who are like, I'm going to get on the memorization thing, I want to learn this right now. These 8 words, you'll know these by the time we walk out of here. So you're already going to be started, okay? Text says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing." It's one of the single great paradigm-shifting, countercultural, assumption-challenging statements in all of the Bible. And I think this morning it's going to challenge yours. It's kind of interesting. The Bible talks about sheep and shepherds more than any other animal in the Bible. We kind of look through it. The Bible talks about cattle around 130 times. It mentions dogs 41 times. It mentions eagles 26 times. Any guesses on how often the Bible talks about cats? None. Because cats were a mistake and God regrets making them. So it's just one of those things. So please don't email me. I know some of you want to email about that, but it's in the Bible, or it's not in the Bible really in this case. So, but here's the thing. The text, the Bible mentions sheep and shepherds 500 times, over 500 times. Which is as to say, there's something about how a shepherd looks after a sheep that can help us understand how God relates to us. So just quick show of hands. How many shepherds are in the room this morning? Okay, there are not many. Maybe a few of you are thinking about it, or you want to be one, so you're raising your hand. Probably not too many, which means when we read a text like this, we're going to misunderstand almost automatically the kind of assumptions, the real kind of sense of the text, the true nature of the picture that David's painting, because this is not the world we live in. And so this morning we need to unpack a little bit of this ancient world and this analogy so that we can understand the paradigm that David's inviting us to live in. There's a great little book called A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23 by a writer named W. Philip Keller. Keller was born in East Africa. He spent much of his life tending sheep for many years. And he wrote this about what it means to be a shepherd. Listen to these words. He said, I recall quite clearly how in my first venture with sheep, the question of paying a price for my ewes was so terribly important. They belonged to me only by virtue of the fact that I paid hard cash for them. It was money earned by the blood and sweat and tears drawn from my own body during the desperate and grinding years of the Depression. And when I finally bought that first small flock, I was buying them literally with my own body, which had been laid down with this day in mind. Because of this, I felt in a special way that they were very much in truth a part of me and I a part of them. But the day I bought them, I also realized that this was but the first in a long-lasting endeavor in which from then on I would, as their owner, have to continually lay down my life for them if they were to flourish and prosper. The Lord is my shepherd. That means, if you say that phrase, that means I belong to someone. That means someone has paid a price to be with me, to call me their own. The Lord is my shepherd means that someone has committed to continually lay down their life for the sake of my own. Now, if this is true, this should begin to challenge or rattle the assumptions that many of you, or many people you know, have about the nature and character of God. Because for a lot of people, the word God conjures up a lot of different images. A quick-tempered deity, an uninvolved parent, a cosmic referee who's up there keeping score on your life in the sky. Sound familiar? In my work as a pastor, I find more and more people who believe that God is more careless than caring. He's really more careless than caring. And they look at the world and they kind of see evidence of that, or so they think. There's a pastor and author named Max Lucado who once read a story in a newspaper about a woman who owned a parakeet. And one day she decided that the cage for her parakeet needed to be cleaned, but she didn't have a lot of time, so she decided to clean that cage with a vacuum cleaner. The problem is she forgot to take the parakeet out of the cage. So right after she stuck the hose in, her phone rings, she looks down at her phone, and she hears this thump. Any guesses on what happened? That parakeet didn't even see the evil coming his way, right? He had no idea. But thankfully, she opened up the vacuum. The parakeet lived, so it's okay. Don't call PETA. The parakeet lived, right? And she actually then took the parakeet, put it under the faucet to try to kind of rinse it off because it was covered in dirt and soot. And then she dried it off with her hairdryer. Well, the reporter called back a few weeks later and said, how's the parakeet doing? Like, what's going on? The woman said, I don't get it. He doesn't chirp anymore. He just sits there and stares at the wall. Maybe because you vacuumed him up with your vacuum cleaner, right? What happened? A lot of people in our world look at the pain and suffering and think, gosh, whoever's in charge, whoever's out there must be far more careless than caring. But here's the thing. David didn't write these words, the Lord is my shepherd, from a perspective of kind of a naive shepherd boy. Verse 5 mentions David's enemies, which we know he will have much later in his life, which is why scholars believe this psalm was probably written later in his life. Many believe at a place called Mahanaim. And Mahanaim is a place where David was actually fighting a civil war with his own son Absalom. And it was where his son was eventually killed by David's own men. David in that state was heartbroken. David was working through a situation he would never get over for the rest of his life. And it was there in David's darkest hour that he most likely penned these words, "The Lord is my shepherd." As if to say, God is not the cause of danger. God is the one who finds me and rescues me from it. And some of you have been through a dark hour in your life. I know that. Some of you are in that dark hour right now. In fact, in 2 weeks, we're going to spend Sunday really thinking about God's presence with us in the place of that dark valley. And if you know somebody, if you or you know somebody you know is going through a season of feeling hopeless or helpless, I would encourage you to bring him to church on Sunday. That's October 21st, to be part of that weekend. But when we're in the dark valley, we are most tempted to believe the wrong things about God. We're most tempted to buy into the wrong paradigm, that there's no one that cares about my well-being but me, that this life is somehow all there is, that God is a quick-tempered or angry deity or a distant parent, instead of believing and remembering that God is my shepherd. In fact, the great preacher Charles Spurgeon once said that the most important word in Psalm 23 is the word "my." The Lord is not a shepherd. He's not even the shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. Which means God knows about my life. He understands my pain. He's living right now with you and with me in the present tense, not harping on the past or dwelling on the future, but right in the present. God is with you, not keeping score, not far away. Which is why when David was writing the psalm, and he wrote the words, "The Lord is my shepherd," I don't think it came out like, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Okay, the pastor wants me to memorize that, right? It was like, the Lord is my shepherd. I've got a shepherd. I have someone who's looking after my life. Even though it's hard, even though it's difficult, even though there's pain, I've got a shepherd. I've got a shepherd. Which is why he can also say, "And I lack nothing." I mean, think of the list of all the things that you think that you lack. Because we all have a list, right? You know, you lack the job you want, you lack the relationship you want, you lack the income you want, you lack the title you want, you lack the stuff you want, you lack the money you want. Our lives are driven by attending to what we believe we lack, which is a sign that we're living in the wrong paradigm. Because get this, there is a God who is enormously good and infinitely loving, who wants to be the committed and consistent caregiver of your life. That's a shepherd. There is a God who is enormously good and infinitely loving, who wants to be the committed and consistent caregiver in your life, which means He's enough. There's nothing you lack, which doesn't mean you'll never have wants or needs. It means that you know that your shepherd is good and all that he has is available to you. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is not some angry deity or cosmic referee. The Lord is my shepherd. Do you feel these simple words beginning to change the paradigm? Well, they can change it even further because there's other assumptions about God that we carry that need to be corrected. And one of the common ones in our day is this idea that God is sort of like a divine buddy or butler, or almost like a cosmic therapist who exists solely to solve your problems and make you feel better. In fact, there's a sociologist at Notre Dame named Christian Smith. He's an amazing researcher. He's one of the leading experts on religion and spirituality in our day, particularly among young people. And he argues that the fastest growing religion, the fastest growing faith system in America is not Christianity or Buddhism or even atheism. He argues that the fastest growing religion is what he calls moralistic therapeutic deism. Now, you didn't come to church expecting to hear that phrase today, so it's a bit of a mouthful, but let me unpack this for you because you'll recognize all the ideas that go in this. It's the idea that God wants you to be a good person, but it's not really clear to anybody what good really means. That's the kind of moralistic part, this idea that I'm supposed to be good, but it's kind of up to you to decide what good looks like. It's this idea that God's goal is to help you feel better about yourself. That's kind of the therapeutic part. You know, this idea that if there's a God out there, his main goal is that I would wake up in the morning and just kind of feel pleasant about who I am. And then it's this idea that God doesn't really ask anything of you, but will help you when you have a problem. That's this deism part, the idea that God's far away, he's distant, he's uninvolved, but maybe he'll show up and help you when you have a problem because he's God. I was thinking about kind of a way to illustrate this. It's kind of like a book title I saw about being a parent of a teenager called Get Out of My Life, but First Could You Drive Me and Cheryl to the Mall? Right? Those of you with teenagers are like, oh my goodness, that's exactly it, right? This is kind of how people think about God. God, I don't particularly want you to be involved in my life, but if you could help me solve my problems and get me to the mall on your way, that would be helpful. God, I don't really want to obey you, but I do need help with this problem I have. God, I don't really want your wisdom in my life, but I really want you to help me feel better about myself. So can we get on that? But here's the thing. The Lord is not a divine butler here to solve your problems. The Lord is not just a casual buddy here to help you feel better. The Lord is a shepherd, which means he's close, which means he's not interested in rules for the sake of rules. He's interested in your well-being, your safety, your life, your future. He's involved. And most importantly, he wants you to follow after him. The Lord is my shepherd. Which means, and this is the part you're not going to like, so just give you that kind of preview, okay? This is the part that you're not going to like. I don't like this. To say that the Lord is my shepherd, you know what that makes you and me? Sheep. And while that might sound like kind of a cute image to some of you, it's not meant to be taken in kind of a cute way. I think about how, belittling and humbling, kind of humiliating this is. And we all want to have at least status as a sheep, like I'm a senior pastor. Can I be like the senior sheep? Like what, is there some way to have some kind of, to elevate that? No. You're just a sheep. And here's the thing. Sheep are not known for their strength or their power. Sheep are not intimidating. You don't tremble in awe in their presence. Think about it this way. There are such a thing, there's wild dogs, there's wild pigs, there's wild horses. There's no such thing as a wild sheep. Because sheep need guidance. Sheep need direction. Sheep need someone to provide for them. Sheep cannot take care of themselves. Some year ago, the BBC reported, this is a true story, a news story that happened in eastern Turkey of a flock of sheep that went over a cliff. In fact, 1,500 sheep went over the same cliff, and 400 of them died. You know how it started? With just one. One sheep went over, and then another sheep, and then another sheep, and then another one. And you'd think at some point the sheep would have stopped and said, I've watched all of my friends go over the ledge. Maybe I should pause and think strategically about my next step and what action I want to take here. But they didn't. And here's the thing. We don't either. Truth is, people are not that different. We are stubborn. We spend a lot of time thinking about feeling enslaved to what other people think about us. We are easily frightened and discouraged. We get envious of what other people have. We'll go right over that cliff as somebody else is doing it. A prophet named Isaiah once expressed this way. He said, we all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way. And here's the thing. Isaiah understood the implication of this phrase in a way that we often miss because we're not shepherds. He says when each one goes their own way, there's a real looming implication to that. Because you see, sheep, when left to themselves, die. Sheep who wander off on their own by themselves die. Sheep without a shepherd will die. Which is why the most important question in your life today, it may not be the question you walked in thinking about this morning, but the most important question that you're facing in your life right now is simply this: who is your shepherd? Who is your shepherd? Who have you entrusted your life to? Is it your income? Is it your retirement plan? Is it a relationship or a relationship status? Is it your reputation, how people see you? Is it your comfort or level of success you have in life? Who is your shepherd? And more importantly, let me ask you this. Does it care about you? Does it care about your life? Does it understand your needs? Can it protect you through the storms? Does it know when you're hurting? Who is your shepherd? Everybody has one. Who or to what have you entrusted your life? And here's the thing. You can only have one. You can only have one. Sheep will recognize a lot of voices. We know this. But they'll only follow one. Kind of cool picture of this, there was a professor from University of Durham in England who was studying in Israel, and she was walking on a road near Bethlehem, and at this point she saw 3 different shepherds converge on the road and begin to have a conversation. And while they talked, their 3 separate flocks began to intermingle and get all mixed together, and they weren't marked or branded or tagged in any way. But the shepherds didn't have to go physically separate them out when they were through talking. Do you know what they did? They just began to walk their separate ways and call their sheep to follow them. And one by one, each sheep followed its own shepherd. Sheep will recognize a lot of voices, but they'll only follow one. Which means, now think about this. Think about this. What this means is the welfare of a sheep is not based on its intelligence or its attractiveness or its IQ or its success. The welfare of a sheep is based on the quality of its shepherd. The welfare of a sheep is based solely on the quality of its shepherd. When that writer, Philip Keller, was working as a shepherd, there was a flock of sheep that was on the land next to his, and they were underfed, they didn't have adequate shelter, and they would spend their days huddled up against the wire fence, gazing through at the greener pastures on the other side. And he said his heart would just break. But not because the sheep were bad. It's because they had a bad shepherd. It's because they had a bad shepherd. And he described it this way. He wrote this: when all is said and done, the welfare of any flock is entirely dependent on the management afforded them by their owner. Which means, and I want you to hear this, and just think carefully about this, being content, having joy, experiencing abundance in your life is not about how smart you are, how intelligent you are, how successful you are, how attractive you are. It's about the quality of your shepherd. That's it. Now think about the shepherd in your life. Some of you have entrusted your life, your future, to your wealth. But how much does your money really care about you? Some of you have entrusted your life to your achievements, to success, to status. Can those hold up in the midst of a storm? Some of you entrusted your life to reputation or winning the approval of others. If people just think highly of me, then I'll be safe. Well, how will that provide for you when failure comes your way? Sheep do not thrive because of anything about the sheep. They thrive when they follow a better shepherd. Kind of reminds me of a moment when Jesus looked out at the human race. He saw us and all of our mess and all of our calamity. And he looked out and he didn't blame, he didn't point the finger, he didn't get angry. The Gospel of Matthew says this: when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. He's a shepherd, he knows. Because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. They were underfed, they lacked protection, they were huddled up against the fence, peering out at greener pastures on the other side. Not even aware that they were living in the wrong paradigm. Jesus knew better than anybody that the welfare of a sheep is based on the quality of the shepherd, which is why Jesus said, and now I think you're ready to hear these profound words because they can change the paradigm in your life. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. I'm the one you want. I'm the one you want to trust. I'm the one you want to follow. In fact, Jesus came to replace all the false and bad and misguided shepherds that we have entrusted our lives to. All the stuff that leaves you harassed and helpless and feeling underfed and undernourished and discontent. And notice, he's not pointing the finger at you. He's making a claim about himself. He's not asking sheep to reflect on how miserable they may be. He's saying, I want you to see what kind of shepherd I am. And he went on to say this, I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Notice this isn't religious language. This is relational language. This is intimacy language. And here's a little bit of context for you in unpacking a phrase like this. In the world where Jesus lived, grass did not grow kind of lush and green everywhere like it does because of the rains in our part of the world. Sheep would need to move from pasture to pasture to pasture. They were always on the move, which means they didn't survive by being kept in one place inside a pen. They survived by following the voice of the shepherd. And there are too many Christians in our day that are far too focused on how to stay safe in the pen. If I follow the rules, if I'm just polite and good, if I just stay right here. But Christianity is not about following rules. It's about knowing the voice of the shepherd. It's about a relationship with the shepherd. It's recognizing his voice. It's recognizing his voice. When I get home from work, our daughter Nora is about 18 months old, and when I get home from work, she's at that beautiful, cute little age where she'll see me and say, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. And then she'll look at our dog who has gray and white hair and say, Daddy, Daddy. Sometimes she looks at the microwave and says, Daddy. But she knows me, trust me, she knows me, okay? I promise, she knows me. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. And listen to what else he said. This is a really remarkable shepherd. He went on to say, I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. I must bring them in also. They too will listen to my voice. And some of you are thinking, I'm an outsider here. I don't know if I believe this stuff. I'm not really sure I like church or going to church. I don't really think I fit in. Can I tell you a secret? I don't always like church either, and I work there, Jesus came not just for people who know God or know about God. He came for people who don't. He compared himself once to a shepherd who left 99 sheep to go find what? Just one. What kind of crazy shepherd is this? And then Jesus said these words, and hear these words, the good shepherd. What makes the good shepherd the good shepherd? What makes him worth following? What makes him worth changing your paradigm over is that this shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Because you see, sheep don't come to belong to a new shepherd for free. They have to be bought. We have to be paid for through the blood, sweat, and tears of a really good shepherd that's willing to do what we cannot do for ourselves. I have a friend who's a pastor, and his daughter was graduating from college, and he was speaking at her commencement ceremony. And before the ceremony, they got together with the president of the university with a few students for the special kind of awards ceremony. And these 3 students were kind of acknowledged for their academic achievement and for their plans for the future. And so they got to kind of applaud them and pray for them. It was this kind of beautiful moment. But then the president of the university had this surprise for each of those 3 students. He turned to the first student, looked them in the eye, and said, there's somebody that you don't even know, you've never even met, who's so impressed, so excited about what you want to do with your life, so moved by that he's decided to pay off your debt. It was like $80,000. That student was just imagine that. The student started just to sob. Then he turned to a second student and said, there's someone that you don't even know, that you've never met, who has agreed to pay off your debt, which was like $90,000. And that student just lost it. You can imagine, right? Then he turned to the third student. That student's just trembling, right? Of course. And can't even believe the words that she knows she's going to hear until the president says, your debt has been canceled as well. It was like $120,000. And my friend, the pastor who was there, speaking at the ceremony because of his daughter, was thinking to himself for a moment, I have a daughter too. What about our debt? What's going on here? Friends, there is someone that you may not even know, maybe you've never really heard of, who has agreed to pay off your debt and to buy you back and to call you his own. A shepherd who is better than every other shepherd you've entrusted your life to this point. A shepherd who came down from heaven, who was put on a cross, and through his blood and sweat and tears bought your life back. He bought you back so that you could say, in whatever circumstance, no matter how much turbulence you face, I've got a shepherd. I've got a shepherd. I've got the good shepherd. And so I want to give you a chance right now just to talk to Jesus about that in your life. So if you just close your eyes, bow your heads for just a moment. We're going to have just a short conversation with God. And if you've never asked Jesus to be your shepherd, the shepherd of your life, I want to give you a chance to do that right now. You can just say these words in the quiet of your heart. You can say these words to Jesus. Jesus, I'm just a sheep. I know it. And I've wandered off to follow all sorts of things that don't satisfy. Jesus, it's why I feel like my life is kind of huddled up against this fence, always looking for the greener grass, for that which would truly satisfy. And so right now, I'm going to confess to you, Jesus, I need a new shepherd. You can tell him that. And then you can say, I believe that you gave up your life to be that shepherd for me, to buy me back, to pay my debt, to call me your own. Some of you may have believed in Jesus for a long time, but your life kind of reveals that you've been living out of a different paradigm, one that's not based on a good shepherd, but based in greed or pride or fear. And you can tell him right now, you can confess again, the Lord is my shepherd. You can say those words to him right now. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. I've got a shepherd. And here's the thing. He is enough. He is truly enough for whatever you face. Jesus, you are the good shepherd. And when we have you, there is nothing we lack. And today, we simply want to confess that, declare that, celebrate that. You are our shepherd, and I have all I could want. You are my portion. I have everything I need. So lead us and guide us and refresh us today and every day. And we pray this in your name. And everybody said, amen.